in the studios, we've been joined by Dr. Auqaab Alizai. He's a geostrategic expert. Dr. Auqaab, thank you very much to have joined us in the studio. We've also will be joined a bit later by Bakar Hassan. He's a strategic affairs analyst and will be joining us from Melbourne. We'll begin with you, Dr. Alizai. President Trump says a deal could be reached within a week. Iran says that negotiations have made little progress. In your point of view, are we genuinely close to an agreement because the weekend is just like, say, 2 days afterwards? Or are both sides trying to gain leverage before making some kind of a final concession or a deal? What are the biggest obstacles in your point of view that are preventing a final deal from happening?
I think we've been hearing this a lot in the last couple of months, since the first ceasefire agreement came about, and the deal was constantly, since the whole of March, April and May, the idea of a ceasefire was there and the deal being made, and there was conflicting information. And I think it's a lot to do, more importantly as far as the United States is concerned, with Donald Trump, to do with relaxing the markets more than anything else and allowing consumers to carry on without thinking that there's going to be a catastrophe along the way. Because the longer this continues, it's going to be more detrimental to the United States and Donald Trump specifically, and the rest of the world community. So it's trying to balance that view. As far as Iran is concerned, they've always been resistant because their strong red lines are, we are not going to give up our enriched nuclear material. We're not going to compromise on the Hormuz Strait, and we're not going to compromise on the freeze assets. And the fact of the matter is, when it really comes down to this, it is a matter of bargaining. And I think I've mentioned this many times before. It is a matter of which country blinks first. Is it Iran or is it Trump? And Trump's trying to gain sympathy amongst his own domestic community, as well as Iran is. He doesn't want to show any weakness whatsoever.
No, it doesn't want to show any weakness whatsoever. Nevertheless, in all of this environment, the US reportedly wants long-term restrictions, Dr. Alizai, on Iran's nuclear activities, as well as the removal of enriched uranium. Huge issue, this enriched uranium, if you see the statements by Donald Trump in the last few weeks. While Iran wants sanctions relief, and of course access to frozen assets, there are some reports that there might be some kind of a sanctions relief, but nothing is for sure as we speak. Which side currently has the strongest negotiating position? What's your take?
When you look back on what happened in 2015 when the comprehensive plan, joint plan of action occurred, and that took many months of negotiation. It didn't happen overnight. Iran has feasibly become much more capable in its nuclear activities, in its infrastructure, even though last year there was a lot of bombardment and there was a degradation of that. But what actually has happened is that they've had a much greater capability than they had before. And there's the enrichment, primarily as a result of the abandoning of the joint comprehensive plan of action in 2018. So when you look at that, and the bargaining position Iran has, the fact is Iran can wait it out longer than Trump. United States as a community is obviously very different. And what matters here is that how long can they sustain the economic downfall and the global community and the pressure put upon via the European Union, ASEAN, other countries around the world to say, let's stabilize this, let's make a change, and let's get it back on track, the economy, because the longer you leave it, the more detrimental it will become to the global environment. Economic environment, as you know, will be suffering.
It is suffering. The economic environment is suffering as we speak.
But it's going to get worse. And it goes to a point where European countries and United States and many other countries are using up already the strategic reserves. As they use up the reserves, there's going to come to a point of critical mass. When it turns to a point where they can't have any more, it could return to a point of recession and even depression. And that's a very dangerous situation for the whole world.
We've been warned, we continue to be warned by the IMF, by the World Bank, by so many other entities as well. OECD also warns about that. Coming to you, Dr. Auqaab, the US House has voted to limit President Trump's authority to continue military action against Iran without congressional approval. Small margin, the win was by a small margin, but it was a win nevertheless for them. Does this increase pressure the White House into securing a diplomatic victory rather than risking another round of fighting? Or will they move forward if the situation allows them to, strike one way or the other because of certain reasons?
Of course. I think if you look back just a few weeks ago, the resolution was placed, but Trump was able to delay it because he knew he was going to lose it, as he did, because there's Republicans now joining the opposing ranks.
There was a small number of Republicans.
But that's enough to turn the tables and change and allow Congress to be the adjudicator of what happens as far as the war is concerned. And he would have to, by law now, abide by what Congress says. He cannot conduct activities. And what does that do? What that does is reduce his leverage. And by reducing his leverage, what happens is that he doesn't have as much control over the argument here and over the negotiations. And you've got to look at it from the Iranian perspective. If you see an opposition having internal discord and the leader of that doesn't have the same leverage as it had before, you're going to think that you're winning. And that empowers and emboldens the opposition, meaning the Iranians, more so to hang tight and stick it out a little longer because they think that they're winning in this respect. And that perception is whether they are or not is a different issue, but the perception of that leadership thinking it's winning is very important, and how much they're going to stand their ground and push it further. I think that's very important.
There's a war of perception as well, and I agree with you on that. Iran has time and again asked for the atrocities being committed by Israel in Lebanon to end. How closely are the Lebanon-Israel ceasefire and the US-Iran talks now linked as we speak? Because a number of statements that have come in this regard are, at least 3 to 4, if not more, from all the high-ranked Iranian officials. Could one front derail the other?
Of course it can. And if you look back, and the original ceasefire agreement was inclusive of Lebanon, even though the United States said it is not, it was at that time. Israel has put a lot of pressure to be able to exploit the environment and do what they want to go into Lebanon. They've been wanting to do this for a while. There is that element of the Greater Israel issue here along at least until the Litani River. And they've occupied the whole area. And if you recognize what's going on, there are peace agreements, they say, and talks between the Lebanese government and Israel.
Well, a peace deal has been reached, but of course, we'll come to that later. But I'm just trying to link the Iranian issue and the Lebanese issue. Are they interlinked? How strongly are they interlinked?
As far as Iran is concerned, they're intrinsic. They're intrinsic to this. And if you know about what happened a couple of nights ago and the conversation between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, with a lot of expletives as far as Trump, there was a reason, because he realizes that this is interconnected, and he didn't want Israel to go beyond the boundaries, and Israel was pushing its own interests to the detriment of the wider region, because that's what it did in the first place. The whole rationale behind the US government in the whole case of this war is that Israel wanted to go it alone, and they were going to do it, and so US had to join in anyway, and they were pressured into it. Why is there that pressure from a small country in the Middle East on such a large global superpower?
Well, that is something that we can discuss a bit later in the show as well. Last question to you regarding this segment. You're not going anywhere, Dr. Auqaab. The IAEA says that post-war Iran is more advanced technologically than during the original nuclear deal. In your point of view, does that mean that any new agreement that is signed between the US and Iran will have to be more significantly tougher and more detailed than the original JCPOA agreement?
I wouldn't call it tougher per se. I think that any advancement, as I just mentioned earlier on, because of the situation, because of the scrapping of the original agreement by Donald Trump in his first term, Iran utilized that moment to enrich. For whatever reason they have, that's speculative, and we can talk about that later on. Fact of the matter is they've enhanced themselves in many ways. And even though from last year's bombardment and the bombardment during the hostilities and the actual kinetic action in March. That the United States and Israel said they obliterated again the nuclear facilities, etc. They didn't, and the Iranians have surfaced again because they've been able to scatter
and
things.
And the
around.
IRGC has said time and again it has the necessary facilities and it is ready in case any such issue resurfaces.
This is the thing, though, isn't it? The actual thing is that is Iran ready just in case? Now you've got a different authority basis
well, it
behind
seems that Iran is ready despite whatever happened. It's ready for whatever consequences.
Ready for what? The idea is they're much closer to acquiring a weapon than they were before.
Well, that I don't know.
Well, the fact of the matter, they are. In the sense that they've been able to enrich up to 60-65%. And there's just a
that
slight...
is why uranium enrichment is one of the preconditions as far as
Donald
Trump is concerned. We've got lots more to discuss, Dr. Auqaab, so let's go to the next topic. Ladies and gentlemen, again in the Middle East, after months of bloodshed, destruction and displacement, Israel and Lebanon have once again agreed to a ceasefire framework. But many Lebanese are asking a simple question: can this truce be trusted? Previous ceasefires were repeatedly violated. Israeli strikes continued even during negotiations, and more than 1 million Lebanese have been displaced while thousands have been killed or wounded. For Lebanon, the real test is not the agreement itself. It is whether Israel will finally stop its attacks or withdraw from Lebanese territory and respect Lebanon's sovereignty. Now, discuss that with us. Dr. Alizai continues with us. Lebanon has heard promises of ceasefires before, yet Israel's military operations continue. We are seeing that as we speak. Why should the Lebanese people believe that this agreement will be any different?
I think it's a very similar situation towards the exchange between the United States and Iran. There is a massive trust deficit. Israel has not ever honored its commitments in previous ceasefire deals. And they continue to bombard. And you've got to understand what this so-called, and I say so-called, ceasefire agreement entails. It says to expel all of Hezbollah. I mean, maybe that's in strategic interest of Israel, obviously. That was the whole idea, to expel them from those border areas across the other side. But also, they've got other stipulations that would entail a large movement of even the Shia population out. I mean, that's impinging upon the sovereignty, absolute impingement on the sovereignty of Lebanon.
But that's what they wanted. That's what they've always wanted.
But this is how power politics works. And why are they doing this? There's many reasons why they want. The whole idea is that they want to stop Hezbollah from having any access to fire missiles into Israel, but it's only a few miles, and push that as a buffer zone, and in the long term, use it as an occupied territory.
The yellow line.
But occupied territories, like the Golan Heights, and eventually normalize that. But bombarding, not making it easy for the people to live there, people are suffering in real terms.
They're emulating the Palestinian model into Lebanon. That's exactly what they're doing.
Who's complaining? Nobody's complaining. Really, a couple of countries are complaining here or there, but there's no unified.
Some other countries are. Pakistan is.
But I'm thinking about the Western world here. Who the power brokers, the people who can put real pressure on Israel in real terms, in economic terms.
All right.
Why are they not doing anything about
All
this?
right. Why are they not doing anything? Last question regarding this very topic. The economic losses, Dr. Alizai, are estimated at over $20 billion US, and this is not a small amount for the place that is Lebanon. In your view, who bears or who will bear the responsibility for rebuilding the areas that have been devastated by the war and occupation?
Rightfully thinking about this, it should be Israel that bears responsibility for all the destruction they've created unnecessarily, and the plight of the people therein. Because the local communities can't sustain such losses, and they can't rebuild with their own money and their own capacity. Lebanon is already within a fragile condition economically, and this is pushing it to a certain position where it can't sustain that anymore. So I think an international forum needs to take place to find benefactors and countries that were willing to aid Lebanon in many ways. I think that's very important that comes through in post-conflict reconstruction. But how long will this last before Israel comes again? And the strategic picture here, if you look all the way back, I always put history in this because that's an understanding of what the situation is recurring here. 1982, when Israel came into Lebanon and incited and created conditions for furthering the civil war, whatever the reasons are there, it seems very similar. Why? Because they want a division between the Lebanese Christian community, for example, and other Muslims, Sunni Muslims, and the Shia community. And by doing that, creating the environment of instability and conflict on the borders where these parties are constrained on themselves as opposed to Israel is what they would prefer. Instability outside, so they can control the instability like they did in Syria and help divide the country. That's the definition.
To cut you short, Dr. Alizai, let's take you exactly to this very issue that I was discussing with Dr. Alizai, and that is economy. The world economy is entering a period of unprecedented uncertainty, from the US-Iran conflict and disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz to soaring energy and fertilizer prices, rising inflation, slowing growth, mounting food security concerns. Global institutions including the OECD, the IMF, World Bank, IEA warn of severe consequences if this persists. Can diplomacy stabilize markets before the economic turmoil turns into a global recession? This is what we will discuss in our last segment, and for that we continue to be joined by Dr. Alizai. But we've and speaking of global economy, Dr. Alizai, severe energy disruptions are what is being said by the IEA and other important organizations as well. Has the strategic cost of this confrontation between the US and Iran begun to outweigh its geopolitical gains?
I think the whole war in itself wasn't really planned well as far as the US and Israel were concerned. They didn't recognize that they would have such strategic consequences. I think on Donald Trump's mind, this easy kidnapping of the Venezuelan president and the change of heart within Venezuela and control that situation reflected on him that this could happen in Iran. So it was very short-sighted.
Okay.
And what happened is that Iran is a very different kettle of fish. What it is in the heart of global energy supply. And it knew its own strategic leverage. It consistently told the world, we will block the Strait of Hormuz.
And it has shown it.
And nobody configured this. And the pressure that the US is putting on and Israel is putting on in Iran has become counterproductive.
All right, it has become counterproductive. I'll come. This brings us to the end of this week's Beyond Borders. We'll be returning next Monday with the new issues, and of course, we'll let you make the complete informed decision at the end, but we'll continue to bring perspectives from different sides.